Hi, my name is Steve Brew, and this is the relationship between expressive writing and performance on a cognitive load task. To better understand the relationship between expressive writing and a performance on a cognitive load task, it is important to first define what cognition is. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of cognitive tasks our brains use daily. There is an innumerable amount of information that we perceive and then process constantly throughout our day. What we eat, how active we are, how we were developed, our temperaments, our IQ, and even how much sleep we got the night before are a fraction of all the factors that affect our cognitive ability from day to day. Our cognitive ability is mainly affected by our cognitive function. Cognitive function is multiple higher mental processes dealing with how information is acquired, applied, and processed. Cognitive function is affected by cognitive load, which is the used amount of working memory resources. Because of this, the more cognitive load an individual has put onto them, the more negatively impacted their cognitive function will be at performing any kind of cognitive task. It is well documented that anxiety and depression can negatively impact cognitive functioning either together or separately. A form of mitigating both anxiety and depression overall stress in general is through expressive writing tasks in which the individual expresses how they are feeling through personal journaling. Because of this, it can be assumed that expressive writing can potentially mitigate present symptoms of anxiety and depression, alleviating some cognitive load and allowing an individual to perform better at a cognitive task. The purpose of this study is to improve cognitive performance by reducing cognitive load and reducing cognitive load through the act of expressive writing. In order to test my hypothesis, I first gave participants a quick questionnaire to collect basic information, and then place them into a control group or the experimental group at random. Participants were asked to take a Stroop test, which is simply a cognitive load task in which participants must say the color of the ink of a word on a randomly generated card. The words on the card in this experiment were also colors, but written in different color ink. For example, if a participant drew a card that said red on it, red would be written in blue ink, and they would have to say the color blue. This cognitive load task creates the Stroop effect, and participants have to cognitively process the color of the ink and say that color without saying the word that's on the card. Participants were first asked to take a pre-test, which was the Stroop test, and then asked to perform a writing exercise for 5 minutes of time. Group A was given a neutral writing assignment, which was just to copy a DirecTV remote manual. Group B was asked to give an expressive writing task for 5 minutes and write about how they were feeling in general or anything else that might be on their mind. Group B was assured that whatever they wrote would be taken with them afterwards and not read by me, the researcher. After the writing exercise, both groups were given a post-test Stroop test. The difference in time was recorded for both groups, and Group B received a questionnaire that simply asked if what they wrote about was more negative or more positive or wasn't emotional at all. After this, all participants were debriefed. My experiment was composed of 50 test subjects. 24 of my subjects were female and 26 of them were male. The average age range of my subjects were 18 to 22. Most of my participants were recruited through SONA or simply by asking people on campus if they would like to participate in my research. I ran an independent samples t-test in order to compare the difference between Groups A and Group B's performance time. Group B had a mean improvement time of 16.25 seconds. Group A had a mean improvement time of 7.962 seconds. This graph shows how big of a difference between Group A's performance and Group B's performance is after the writing tasks and the pre-tests. The results of my experiment are statistically significant, and so I reject the null hypothesis. It is also important to note that there is also a statistically significant difference between participants in Group B that expressed negative emotions and participants who expressed positive emotions. Participants who expressed negative emotions performed better than participants who expressed positive ones. The purpose of my experiment was to find out if expressive writing had an effect on cognitive performance during a cognitive load task. And the data from my research does in fact show there is a positive impact on cognitive performance when participants expressively write before they perform a cognitive load task. This research is important because it displays that when we express ourselves emotionally, we cognitively perform better, and based on my research, we perform potentially 2.5 times better than if we didn't attend to how we were feeling and instead were non-expressive before a task. As human beings, we are incredibly emotionally complex, and in a society where the culture of expressing oneself is often publicly a stigma or limited, I believe we must ask ourselves if we are also limiting our overall mental performance in all other tasks. It is well documented that test performance is improved when students emotionally express themselves through writing before a big test, and based on my research, it seems that expressive writing improves overall cognition in general. I believe this is also important to note that it does not necessarily mean one needs to expressively write about something emotionally, but perhaps just expressing themselves emotionally in general may also improve cognition. There are many areas in society this can be applied to, and those industries include education, manufacturing, construction, customer service, mental health, human resources, and even the government. That being said, cognition is incredibly complicated and incredibly difficult to measure and explore, and it is very possible that my data may be subject to change, and so this experiment should be tested many more times to prove its validity. I believe that if we could change the stigma of emotional expression, then perhaps we can improve the lives of many people by positively impacting their cognitive performance. Thank you for listening to my experiment on the relationships between expressive writing and performance on a cognitive load task. These are two research articles that were invaluable when deciding not only how to test my hypothesis, but also how to better understand how expressive writing functions and how it helps improve test performance and performance in general. Thank you.